All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 2:33. If you could please do the roll call and teleconference disclosures if we need any.
Okay, we'll start with Director Melanie Bagby. Present. Director Janice Cater Thompson. I don't see. Director Chris Corsi. Here. Director Gerard Giudice.
Here.
Director Ben Ford.
Here.
Director Nisa Hinton, who I also don't see. Director Ariel Kelly is absent today. Director Patricia Ferrara Rivas.
Here.
Director David Rabbit is absent. Director Rosa Reynosa.
Here.
Vice Chair Linda Hopkins.
Present.
And Chair Chris Rogers.
Here.
And we have a quorum and no members on teleconference right now.
Excellent. We'll go ahead and start our meeting for the day with our public comment for non-agenda items. If you have an item that falls within this board's jurisdiction but isn't being discussed today, feel free to either come to the microphone or hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom. Come on up, sir.
Well, I guess I'll start out. I'm glad it's a small meeting. It's easier to do that. I've written down my comments. I've got some copies to hand out, and I wanted to net it down as best I could. So, my name is Richard Harkness. I've written a book about global warming. And when I read about this proposed initiative, it looked promising to me. So I decided to get involved since I've got a technical and planning background. So I read the materials, watched the meeting videos as much as I could, met with the staff and submitted some ideas, shared a white paper I'd written on solar and offered to help if I could. So I'm overwhelmed with this climate crisis, as I'm sure all of us are. And it's such a huge problem. I guess my bottom line on this whole thing is that we got to be smart and we got to spend our resources very efficiently where they're going to do a lot of good. So I'm here today because I'm concerned that without a lot more technical homework, the proposed program may fail. It could end up as a forever tax with a bunch of vague ideas for how to spend the money and not have accountability for results. I think to be successful, the current list of ideas should be narrowed down to a few projects that are proven to work in the real world and that will save the most greenhouse gas per dollar spent. The McKinsey Group has done some neat work on that count. Each should be described in detail along with a good estimate of its cost, greenhouse gas savings, and who will implement it. That homework requires considerable technical and planning expertise. And believe me, I've bent my pick on a few of these things, and it's hard to get the right data together. I feel that only about 10% of the effort needed to prepare a good, solid ballot proposal has been expended so far. So to help assure accountability, I think that the tax, if there is one, should be sunset in about 4 to 6 years. And the reason, one reason for that is with the growing concern that we've got nationwide and certainly here about climate change, I've got little doubt that if we get results, people are going to say, good, we're going to renew it. So in a nutshell, I hope you'll share my vision for what a good ballot proposal should look like. And we'll find the necessary technical experts to add to the effort already underway so as to create that. And it's going to be a lot of work. It really is. Because what sounds good at first glance doesn't necessarily work out in detail. I've been looking at heat pumps, for example, and oh man, God, complicated. Well, anyway, thanks for listening. I wanted to net it down to 2 minutes. I think I've done it. I've given a lot of thought to this since I met with your staff. They were very friendly, helpful, and we had a great meeting, but I can't elaborate more and I won't. However, if any of you are interested in, having coffee and noodling this whole problem that we face, I'd be really happy to do that. That'd be a lot of fun. So I'm going to leave a written copy here with these guys to pass around.
Perfect.
That's all I have to say. Thanks so much.
No, thank you so much. And we will be discussing that item later. So we'll hold on to those comments for that time and take that into account when we have our discussion. So thank you for being here. Drew, do we have any hands?
Yes, we have Steve Bertelbauer. Steve, I have permitted you to speak. You may start reviewing and mute yourself.
Thank you. This is Steve Bertelbauer with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. The news last week shows that worldwide temperatures are higher than they've been in 1,000 years. We know that our driving habits are responsible for more than half of our greenhouse gas emissions. The Air Resources Board has told us in plain English that we can't simply shift from gasoline to electricity we have to reduce our driving by 25% in the next 7 years. I think the time for planning to reduce driving has evaporated. The time for cutting down on driving is here. Sonoma County has the knowledge to demonstrate how to reduce vehicle miles traveled. E-bike trips can replace a lot of driving if all of our roads are protected bike lanes or 15-mile-per-hour speed limits. Those have to be done at the city level and the county level, and they can start now. Remote work can help cut VMT only if people working from home stop using their cars for new errands. Our kids know how to skateboard. We don't need to drive them to school. Just closing a few roads adjacent to schools during the hour before classes begin can encourage walking. MTC has told us that managed parking is a key part of our local toolkit to reduce VMT. Why is it that people who drive a $40,000 vehicle object to paying 25 cents to park? Our urban growth boundaries aim to save open space by preventing sprawl. We can stop building new homes that are not within walking distance of a grocery store. Sonoma County can become an example of VMT reduction for our region and the state, and we need to do the hard work that will show the way. It has to start now, and it has to start at every city level. The county-wide effort is important, but we can't delay things while that comes online. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And then also, I did receive a pre-submitted public comment from Dan Bell, and I have provided it to the SCTA RCPA Board of Directors on right now, and will be posted online.
Great. Thank you so much, Drew. Do we have any other hands?
But I currently do not see any of the members of the public wishing to speak.
Great. I'll close public comment then and bring it back. We have our consent calendar for the day. We have 6 items. Before I go to the board for any questions or comments, I'm going to go to our executive director. 2 of our consent items are accommodations for folks. I'd just like you to say a few words if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I'd like to do is start with recognition of Jenny Berg, who is with MTC ABAG and has been running the Area Regional Energy Network program basically since its inception. And she is retiring, but she has been such a great partner. And I know Tanya would like to say a couple words about the partnership we've had with Jenny over the years. And thank her for all that she's done for the region and for Sonoma County.
Thanks, Suzanne. I did want to highlight just a couple of items from the commendation that should be in your packets. Suzanne mentioned that Jenny founded the BayREN, the Innovative Local Government Regional Energy Network Pilot, and really brought all 9 Bay Area counties together into this amazing network. And because she was so successful in managing the network as a pilot, the CPUC granted BayREN permanent status as a Regional Energy Efficiency Program Administrator in 2019, which is kudos to Jenny for her leadership on that. And then she's continued her leadership in expanding the energy networks statewide. And so we currently have a total of 4 active RENs that are providing these energy and water efficiency programs to 27.5 million California residents. So really a huge accomplishment there. And thanks to Jenny's leadership. Bringing it locally here, we've really seen Jenny be a champion for the power of local government to address climate change. She's really been a very strong believer and supporter of that, and has really helped us achieve success in these programs regionally. Just to give you an example for Sonoma County, our results over the last 10 years, we've served over 2,000 single-family homes with various kinds of energy upgrades and retrofits, 20 multifamily projects, and these are no easy projects to undertake, which have upgraded about 1,400 total units, and we're seeing those numbers grow. And then over 1,000 participants in our home energy score program. Also provided a lot of service for our local government staff with over 20 forums and 38 trainings provided across the county. And that's been really helpful in promoting and increasing the usage of these programs. And then lastly, I just want to give a huge shout out to Jenny for all of her support for the Water Upgrade Save program. As Chris Cohn, our program manager, could probably attest, it's been a very challenging, complex program. And without fail, Jenny has always been there when we've needed her support, her championing new ideas and different ways of doing things. And we really appreciate her leadership. So huge thank you to Jenny, and we are definitely going to miss her, but wish her the best in her retirement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Jenny, did you want to say a few words?
Just thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Suzanne, for your beautiful words. I was fortunate to facilitate the plenary where the great folks of Sonoma County and some of your jurisdictions were highlighted. And as I said, then this is a really great example of local jurisdictions working together with RCPA at the lead, as our former President Obama has acknowledged all of the great work. So this is a bittersweet time for me, but I have full confidence that the future is bright with Bayron. And probably a good time to say that we did poach someone from Sonoma County to take over. Today is Jane Elias's first day, so Sonoma County will continue to be well represented.
And well coached. We still like you.
Good
Thank
to
you
hear.
again. Thank you again so much, Jenny.
All right, the second commendation is for Marge Fernandez, who is retiring from the SCTA RCPA team. Marge is the longest serving employee here at the SCTA RCPA, aside from me. I hired Marge a while back, and she has been in a variety of roles, few of which have caused you to interact with her directly, because she's what keeps everything running behind the scenes. She was my executive assistant to begin with, then took on more general admin for the whole office, and is closing out her career as our analyst. She's done all of our budgets, our audits, our HR, our ISD work. She keeps everything running. And it is definitely bittersweet to have her leave. She's one of the reasons I decided to retire, is that she's leaving. But she's been such a pleasure to work with for our whole entire team. And tomorrow is her last day, or today is your last day. Today is her official last day. And so we wanted to recognize her and appreciate the board's doing so through this resolution today.
Yeah. And Marge, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, I wanted to say thank you to Suzanne for hiring me back in 2003, and to my current director, James Cameron, and all of the other staff members. I've enjoyed working at the SCTA. It's the best place to work. Great leaders, great team, and I enjoyed the work. But it's time for me to retire. I have children and grandchildren, and I just want to enjoy the rest of my life with my family. So with that, I say thank you so much also to the board, and I give my thanks to the team.
Excellent. Let's go to public comment on our consent calendar. If you have a comment, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom or approach the podium. Seeing no hands, I'll bring it back and I'll entertain a motion from the board.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar and a second. Are there any additional comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. That motion passes. Thank you so much, Jenny and Marge. We look forward to not seeing you on our meetings, and I hope you enjoy retirement. And but thank you so much, certainly, for everything that you've done for our county.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to item 5.1 from our regular calendar. That's our climate protection initiative. Send that over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you will recall, we hired EMC research firm to do some polling related to the climate protection initiative. We have with us today Jessica and Aaron from EMC, who will provide a presentation on the results of the polling. I did send out a draft version of the slide deck to you all last week, but it's been slightly updated, and they will walk through the results of the poll for everyone to hear. And then we will turn over the board for discussion. So Erin and Jessica, are you able to share screen? There we go.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us back. I think you should see the cover slide of the presentation. So I am going to go ahead and walk through the results and then happy to answer any questions that the board may have. So as you recall, this was a survey of likely voters in Sonoma County. We used a mixed mode methodology to reach a representative sample of those likely November 2024 voters. So that includes both live telephone interviews that were conducted with live interviewers, professional interviewers, along with online interviewers that were sent out by email and text invitation to likely voters. We did conduct the interviews in June and mid-June, the 15th through the 22nd, and we completed 800 overall. So the margin of error is plus or minus 3.5 percentage points when we're looking at the overall results. As you may recall, we also utilized a split sample methodology to test two different potential ballot measures. So we divided respondents in half. Each sample was demographically representative of likely voters. Half, sample A, was asked about a potential parcel tax measure, and the other half, sample B, was asked about a potential sales tax measure so that we could gain an unbiased read on support for each possibility. And the margin of error for each of those samples is plus or minus 4.9 percentage points. Interviews were offered in both English and Spanish, and we have some data from prior studies on behalf of Sonoma County, so we're able to compare some results over time, and we'll show those to you momentarily. So before we go into the detailed results, just some key findings that we're pulling out here and wanted to review with you. When it comes to the overall mood of the electorate, we see just over half of voters are feeling optimistic about the direction of the county today. When we ask about top of mind concerns, we do see homelessness and housing affordability rising to the top of the list of concerns that voters mention. We do see that climate change is also among the issues cited as a top problem for the area. And majorities say that issues like climate change, wildfires, these are very serious issues facing Sonoma County, according to voters. On the climate resilience measure that we tested in this poll, we see support just over a majority, but substantially lower than the 2/3 supermajority that's required for passage. When we compare support for a sales tax to support for a parcel tax, we don't see a significant difference. Support is lower than the 2/3 threshold for both possibilities. And when we provide additional information about the benefits and the merits of a potential measure, we don't see a significant increase in support. So with that, we'll go into the next slide, which shows the beginning of some of our detailed results. A few notes on the overall environment. As I mentioned, just over half feeling optimistic about the direction of the county. This is a question that we have asked, as you can see, dating back to 2003 among voters in Sonoma County. Do you feel things in the county are going in the right direction, or do you feel things have gotten pretty seriously off on the wrong track? And you can see there have been some kind of blips on the radar in 2020 and 2021. We saw optimism dip, that blue line, down to 49% in 2021, and it is back to being relatively stable with past polling right now at 57% optimistic, 40% pessimistic. So in this slide, this table shows the results over time on the open-ended question that we asked in the poll. What do you think is the most important problem facing Sonoma County today? So on the left-hand side, you can see the results dating back to 2003. And on the far right-hand side, you can see the results from this poll showing that when we ask that open-ended question, what comes up most frequently among Sonoma County likely voters is homelessness, followed by issues around housing affordability. So these are certainly predominant top of mind concerns. We do see issues around climate change and the environment coming up among 7%. We see crime and drugs coming up among 8%. Cost of living, roads and traffic, growth and development are also among the issues that are brought up as one of the most important problems facing the county today. So we also asked not kind of a not open-ended version of this question. So we presented a list of some of the issues facing the county, and about each of them we asked, do you think this is a very serious problem, a somewhat serious problem, a not too serious problem, or a not at all serious problem for the area? And so each of these was presented to respondents, and you can see how they've answered the question over time. What's shown in this table are only the percentage who called the issue a very serious problem. So on the right-hand side for 2023, you can see that 78% say homelessness is a very serious problem. Wildfires, 68% say they are a very serious problem. That's down though compared to 2021, when 81% said wildfires were a very serious problem. Housing affordability, a very serious problem, to 64%, and that's up from the 56% who mentioned that was a very serious problem in 2021. So what's interesting, if you compare the results to 2021, we see increases in the portion saying very serious to issues like homelessness and housing affordability, but we see decreases in climate change, wildfires, and drought, a significant drop from 74% who said that was a very serious problem in 2021 to 43% who say drought is a very serious problem today. A couple of attitudinal questions that we asked to help us understand the issue environment. This one asked, do you agree or disagree changes in Sonoma County can't do anything to affect climate change? So what we were after is the sentiment that changes locally won't really do anything to this big global issue. We wanted to see what portion would agree with that statement. Now here among likely voters, the majority disagree, 62% at least somewhat disagree with that statement, only 38% agree. But we do see some demographic differences. On the right-hand side, you can see a table summarizing some of the differences by demographics. The most prominent difference being among Republicans, who are more skeptical than their counterparts that we can affect climate change at the local level. And we also asked this agree, disagree question to help us understand sensitivity or resistance to new taxes. Do you agree or disagree? I will vote no on any tax increase, no matter what it is for. Really similar result here, 39% at least somewhat agree, and 61% disagree. So you don't have a majority resistant to taxes in general, but we do see a higher resistance to taxes among groups like Republicans, men over 50, and those without a college degree. And when we look at that question over time, although we still see a majority who disagree, they would vote against any tax increase, the portion who agree has actually been going up over time. So back in September 2019, 30% agreed with that sentiment. In 2020, it was 35% who agreed with that sentiment. And now we see 39% who agree they'll vote no on any tax increase, no matter what it is for. So we do see this sort of anti-tax sentiment going up over time, and that's consistent with what we've seen in other communities across the state as well. Now getting to the Sonoma County Climate Resilience Measure, we tested this potential 75-word ballot question in the poll to prevent and reduce the impacts of drought, wildfire, floods, and heat waves, improve water and air quality, ensure reliable water supply, provide reliable transportation alternatives that reduce reliance on gas-powered vehicles, protect wildlife, forests, nature areas, and agriculture, and increase energy efficiency and renewable energy in homes and businesses. Shall this measure be adopted? And as you can see, we split the sample, with half hearing about a potential $52 parcel tax, and the other half hearing about a 1/4 cent sales tax for 10 years with oversight. And you can see the results here for the parcel tax, 51% total support, and for the potential sales tax, 54% potential support. So those do break that majority threshold, but don't come close to the super majority, 67%, that is required for passage. On this slide, we're breaking down the total support for the potential measure on that initial question by demographic subgroups. So you can see there's some fluctuation, some differences in support depending on the demographic subgroup. The size of the subgroup is reflected in parentheses right after the label, so that the demographics here reflect a likely November 2024 electorate. So some of these groups are bigger than others, but it's certainly noteworthy to see some of the differences, particularly by party, with Democrats supportive over that 2/3 mark, but Republican supportive only at 8%, the vast majority, 92%, inclined to vote no on this measure. And you can see some other differences as well, by geography, by gender, and those are the prominent differences here. We also broke the components, the potential components of a measure apart and asked respondents, how important is each of these to you on a scale from 1 to 7, where 1 is not at all important and 7 is extremely important. And what's noteworthy about this slide is not only the order in which we see these items, they're listed in terms of the highest portion rating them as important, but also some of these items certainly are important to the vast majority of voters. Ensuring reliable water supply, 87% consider that at least somewhat important, with 58% who say that's extremely important, rating it as the highest 7 on the 1 to 7 scale. Protect wildlife, forests, nature areas, and agriculture. 84% consider that at least somewhat important, 51% extremely important. Prevent and reduce the impacts of drought, wildfire, floods, and heat waves. The vast majority, 78%, consider that important. Improve water and air quality. Increase energy efficiency and renewable energy in homes and buildings. All of these items are at least somewhat important to about 2/3 or more of voters. The remaining items, important to fewer than 2/3, build bikeways and safe sidewalks, provide reliable transportation alternatives that reduce reliance on gas-powered vehicles, and provide reliable and free public transportation. So we also presented a series of statements providing additional information about the benefits of a potential measure. And we asked, how convincing is each of these statements as a reason to vote for the measure? Very convincing, somewhat convincing, not too convincing, or not at all convincing. And on this slide, we're showing the portion saying very or somewhat convincing, and then the total who say it's a convincing reason to support the measure. The one rising to the top here in terms of the total percent convincing is the one that discusses the accountability features, the fiscal accountability features of a measure. All of the revenue will be spent here in the county, cannot be taken away by the state, includes annual audits and citizens' oversight to ensure our funds are spent as promised. 68% saying that's a convincing reason to support the measure. Following that, some of the particulars about the measure, we have to accept that it is continuing to get hotter and drier. The measure will make sure our community has clean, safe water in the future. 65% say that that's at least somewhat convincing. 27% say it's very convincing. The measure will not only prepare the county for the worst impacts of climate change, it will also help our local economy. 60% saying that's at least somewhat convincing. The county is consistently suffering from the impact of climate with fires, flooding, drought, and significantly hotter days. This measure allows us to plan for the future and increase our resilience so we can continue to live in this amazing area. 58% saying that's a convincing reason to support the measure. And then addressing climate change locally, decreasing emissions, making it safer and easier to get around the county without gas-powered vehicles. 57% saying that's a convincing reason. Now, this slide summarizes the top pieces of information that we provided in the poll about the benefits. On the next slide, you can see the remaining pieces of information that we provided over the course of the survey. And these are all slightly less convincing overall as reasons to support the measure. The top two sort of describing that this is a small price to pay for the sales tax measure. We mentioned that groceries and medicine would be exempt. We talked about the equity and addressing low-income communities and people of color who are more harmed by climate change, and also the first of its kind nature of this measure that could provide a roadmap for other communities. Those are slightly less convincing at 49% each. We also provided some information that you might hear from an opponent of this potential measure. So we wanted to see what are the biggest vulnerabilities if this measure were to go forward. And you can see a variety of things that we presented in the poll that mirrored what we anticipate might be said by an opponent. Things about how, this is just another tax on top of all the taxes we pay. That's convincing to 63%, 42% very convincing. We offered the perspective that these kinds of taxes are regressive, or that California is already one of the most sustainable places in the country, and we can't address this at the local level. These things are convincing to majorities of voters. So here you can see the vote progression over the course of the survey. So as you saw, we started out at 51% total support for a parcel tax, 54% support for a potential sales tax. After we offered additional information about the benefits, we saw support increase to 55% for both measures. And then after opposition statements, we saw support drop considerably below even the initial level of support. So in summary, what we're seeing here is that while climate change and wildfires and local issues around climate are very serious issues to voters in the county, and also that the climate impacts that could be mitigated by a measure are important to the vast majority, despite those things, there appears to be a disconnect between caring about these issues and willingness to support a new tax measure to address them. So accordingly, we think this measure that requires supermajority support doesn't appear viable at this time. And so that concludes the presentation, and we're more than happy to answer any follow-up questions you might have.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. I'll look to the board for questions. Director Giudice?
I didn't have a question, just trying to get my head around next steps forward.
Any additional questions? Anybody? All right, let's go to public comment, and then we'll bring it back for discussion.
Perfect.
If you would like to make a comment, go ahead and approach the podium. Or Drew, do we have any hands on Zoom?
I'm currently not seeing any members of the public that are hands up right now.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion then. Suzanne, what type of feedback would be helpful from the board? Other than just misery?
Yeah.
No, none of that.
Well, I mean, I think the question for staff is, what are the next steps you would like us to pursue on your behalf, or not pursue, I guess, is the alternative. And what sort of time frame should we do that in? We still have our committees that are set up, the program committees, the steering committee. So it's sort of those I guess, logistical questions about how we should proceed. And then also just would be helpful perhaps to hear just the discussion from the board about what this means for this cycle or future cycles.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yep, that's helpful. I'll ask a question and then I'll lead off the discussion if that works for folks. But Jessica, just as a point of information, it looked to me like Democrats were oversampled in the polling. It looked like it was 60% Democrat, 18% Republican.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that mirrors the information that we have on the voter file among registered voters who are also likely, according to their vote history, to vote in November of next year. So this is demographically representative of likely voters.
Okay, so I shouldn't be too worried that the actual results from an election would be, let's just say that the folks most inclined to vote no would show up at a higher clip than what the polling is expecting.
Based on vote history, this is our best guess. Anything can happen in any given election. And I wish I knew exactly what the proportions would be, but based on the information on the voter file and who has voted historically, this is our best estimate of what the demographics would be in a future election.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you and your team for all of their work on this. I want to thank our staff as well as everybody who's participated with the committees to even get us to this point to be able to poll. Obviously, the numbers are not what we would like them to be for trying to pass a successful measure, but there is a lot that's still positive within the poll that I think we should talk about. And Suzanne and I had talked about this when we talked about Measure DD 2 years ago. We did see the canary in the coal mine a little bit, where people were starting to vote against bond measures for schools in that election. And we knew that people don't vote against schools. And so when you start to see people vote against schools, they're really starting to push back, feeling overtaxed, particularly with high inflation, and that it oftentimes is more about the level of taxation than it is even about the importance or the seriousness of the cause that we're trying to solve. And I think I see that in this polling. We have moved in this county from having arguments about whether or not climate change exists to having a substantial amount of folks who recognize the importance of addressing it. And I actually think it's a feather in our cap. There are so many people who look at Sonoma County and say, we've already been doing so much more than everybody else. It's going to be difficult for us to solve the problem on our own. We need to encourage other people. To me, that's not a failure. That's actually a really strong success for what RCPA has tried to accomplish to increase the intelligence and information that we put out there about these serious causes. And we see it reflected in voter sentiment about why it's important to have clean water and clean air and to attach more efforts to address climate change. We've seen it with Sonoma Clean Power as well. So I'm not going to be in favor of moving forward with RCPA doing a measure, particularly not at a 2/3 when we see this. There may be other avenues that we can discuss with some of our colleagues and friends across the county that might open up opportunities. I just don't think that the electorate would be supportive at the 2/3 needed. And I think that it behooves all of us to continue to look for ways in our own jurisdictions that we can advance the ball in the short term, because our constituents are still telling us it's important, even if they wouldn't be supportive of an additional tax. As far as the committees, I would actually love to see them continue to meet to craft a roadmap for how do we get the most bang for our buck in each of our jurisdictions and across the county. Where should we prioritize spending dollars that are limited right now to have the most impact in addressing climate change and meeting this need? I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to the rest of the board. Go ahead, Director Corsi.
Yeah, thanks. I know that staff and board members did quite a bit of public outreach around this. We talked about some different tax vehicles, parcel tax, sales tax, and others. Has there been any discussion about a citizen-led initiative that wouldn't need 2/3, but instead 50% plus one around this type of initiative?
We could talk more about it. I think that there have been folks who have been interested to see what the polling looks like. And we also know that there's other really important issues that are out there. You've got the measure for Sonoma County Fire. It's looking to go. Our kids are our future, right? And so we would have to have a conversation with our partners about what that might look like within that context. But we also know that there are other folks who have renewals that are coming up that we should be at the table discussing how this all pieces together to make our county as successful as it can be.
To date, I haven't heard of any groundswell at the citizen initiative level. I was just wondering if that's been part of the conversation at all. I haven't been as close to this as you have.
Yeah, we certainly will and can discuss.
And mayors and council members last month, we received 2 presentations. One was on fire and the other one was on what? Remind me?
Our kids, our future.
Yeah, our kids, our future. That's right. You just said it. Do we know the polling data from those? Did they actually poll?
I know that they did poll. I know that both looked at it as potentially successful. But I also know both are gathering signatures right now to lower the threshold from that 2/3 to the simple majority. And I think for anybody who's considering anything, whether it's a city measure, sales tax renewals, anything, I think they have to be considering that route, given the high percentage of people who said that they won't vote for anything. It's a high bar, and I don't know, Jessica, Aaron, Suzanne, if anybody wants to talk a little bit about the business roundtable measure that'll be on November and the potential risk that that poses.
Jessica, is that something you could address?
Sure, absolutely. Some of you might be aware of that business roundtable measure that is headed to the ballot and potentially headed to the ballot for November. That would potentially negate the citizens initiative threshold at 50%. So there's a risk for those who are moving forward in that direction, for a potential citizens initiative, if the business roundtable measure does go on the ballot and is successful, it might mean even those measures that pass at the 50+1 threshold don't win. So there's that risk, certainly.
So given the aversion to new taxes and the fact that the other two measures or proposals are related to ours, is there any opportunity for collaboration and repackaging this?
I would be happy to have discussions and pursue that if the board would be interested.
I would be interested.
Those are both, the fire and then Kids Our Future are both set for March next year.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
But there are other opportunities as well. So Director Reynosa.
Yeah, so I want to, I like what I'm hearing, the ideas, but I also think we should go back. The committee should continue to have these conversations. And I actually want to comment on the public speaker that started and consider doing shorter term, the sunset. And also dive in a little bit more to the page that was shared about additional information, that what it would take to convince our voters to vote this way, and dive into the way it was worded. The first one was, how we spend our money. I think it addresses trust and accountability, like was mentioned. So building that relationship with our residents, letting them know that they, we will be spending this money where we say we're spending it. I think that's really important. So definitely focus on those two. And the second one was about water. I know in Windsor, the minute we're building homes, where's the water coming from? Where are we going to get the water? I thought we didn't have enough water. So that discussion is I think also a really important one to include when we're talking about some initiative like this. So let's keep having the conversation, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Any additional comments? Vice Chair.
I just wanted to say that I'm very interested in the idea of, a ballot citizen-led initiative. And I think that in terms of next steps, as you were discussing, Chair, it would be really great to kind of bring this conversation from the board back to the committees and kind of get some of their feedback, because we don't think we've even really had an opportunity, right, to actually have one of those meetings and discuss with, the folks who have contributed such a huge amount of volunteer time into this effort. And I don't want to lose that momentum. I don't want to lose the great analysis and community engagement that we've all worked on to date. I just think that we're going to need to be creative. And I'm really proud to serve on a board where I feel like we see a barrier and we start figuring out, okay, can I go over it? Can I go under it? Can I go around it? What are the creative ways? Can I get a ladder? Can we work together as a team? How do we do this? And I think that's kind of the sense that I'm getting from my colleagues, that there's still a tremendous amount of importance, in moving forward with this in some way or another, or to at least continue the conversation and explore creative options.
Director for our Rivas.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, the timing of this, and that we then had all the information about what are we now on day 5 of the hottest days in the global history. Because I do think, I actually realized, and I mentioned that to a number of people that I know, that you know, kind of, when I polled that, it was like half the people I talked to about that hadn't heard about it. The other half had, and these are people that read. So, you know, I mean, they should have been aware of that. But so I'm wondering, so it's just an interesting timing, but also encourage just looking at that potential collaboration, citizens initiative, but also really digging into what other, what are the most efficient things that we can do now? Where is there other funding, at the federal level, at the state level? Because I know that there's potential buckets of funding that are out there and available. How do we look at those to see like what other initiatives can move forward? But clearly ongoing support of all of the initiatives that really raise community awareness, because that's clearly still needed, even though we have people that are more and more aware all the time. The work is good and being done. We need to continue to do it.
Yeah, the other latest one is the wet globe effect that people are starting to learn about, the confluence between
Right.
humidity and temperature and
Yeah.
the impact that that's going to have, particularly in the Southeast United States. So it is an interesting time. Yeah, go ahead, Director Ford.
Yeah, I'm certainly in support of the committee's sort of continuing their work with a new charge to chart a roadmap and try to figure out other paths towards meeting our climate goals. I'm concerned about the idea of a shorter time frame for a tax measure. If we have a 7-year time frame, you got to start working on renewal at about 5 years and showing results in that. I mean, logging lags actual performance. That sounds really tough. On the flip side, the renewing a tax is somewhat easier than establishing a new tax. So maybe there's hope there, but 7 years sounds like a really tough time frame to turn something around.
Director Bagby.
Yeah, I'm was interested to hear the comments of the board and the public, and what it's we needed to get this information. We needed just to establish a baseline and figure out where we were. But I think that as Director Reynosa pointed out, we need to really drill down into the information. And also, I don't think we can do this by ourselves. We're going to have to partner with other agencies. We're going to have to make sure that this is a broad coalition where everyone feels like they have skin in the game. So if I were to give any direction to the committee, that would be my direction, is to continue on and, really seek community agency partners and, figure out a coalition that will work. And I do agree. I see us going to a community-based initiative and going for 50%. Because I think that more than 50% of voters in Sonoma County know that we need to take action on climate change and we need to do it yesterday. So that's my input. Thank you, Chris.
I appreciate that. And I think I'm hearing a unanimous voice from this board that if not this, then what? Because it's not that the goal isn't necessary. So with that, do you have the direction you need, Madam Executive Director? Great. We'll move on then to item 5.2. It's our Energy Efficiency Building Electrification Program report. Welcome up, BC.
Great, thank you. I'll wait just a minute for Drew to. Thank you. Hey, good afternoon, Chair Rogers and members of the board. My name is BC Capps. I'm a climate change program specialist with the Regional Climate Protection Authority. And I am here presenting today on some of our work recently on building electrification programs and our work that we help coordinate in this office with the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. You heard Jenny Berg earlier, and are coordinating our work here with our team, BayRen, Sonoma Clean Power, and the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division. So, let's see. Where am I pointing to?
Otherwise, just verbally.
Here, why don't you?
Yeah, you got it.
Cool, thanks, Ross. So the presentation today, I kind of had three major points or three major parts of this presentation I wanted to speak about. First, to talk a little bit about our background on the policy context around kind of this work on building electrification and energy efficiency. Second, to talk on, give a highlight on some of our existing programs that are currently running on both to assist the electrification of new construction and existing buildings. And wanted to wrap up with talking about some of our future efforts and the new offerings that we're going to have here through our office. And we're looking forward to working with Bayren on in partnership. So first off, I wanted to talk briefly about the greenhouse gas inventory that RCPA conducts every 2 years. So we have data now that goes back to 1990. And we track this. We'll begin work shortly on doing our next update on this. But on our last report, we were able to show that we have Sonoma County in total has reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 23% since 1990. We had set a goal of 25%, so we were just short of that goal, but very, I think, a remarkable effort that's been made. And what this graph shows, you can see the star that's at the very bottom, and it shows the circle where we're at now approximately, and the steep decline that we need to make in our greenhouse gas emissions to reach our goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. And so that really, there's two parts of that. One is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. The second then is working with other partners to increase carbon sequestration, and a lot of work looking to work with on forest land restoration and things like that to try to kind of balance out that carbon equation. These total numbers, or this kind of large graph, this is made up of several different parts. Emissions that come from our buildings, and the energy used for our buildings, energy that's used for emissions related to transportation, emissions related to waste, related to water delivery, and related to agriculture are all wrapped up in here. And for the rest of the presentation, I'm really going to be focusing in on the building energy piece and really thinking about the energy that's needed for the lights, for our heating, for our cooling, for all of those pieces. This graph here shows kind of shows the greenhouse gas emissions specifically in the building energy sector from that time period of 1990 to 2020, and really shows this is split. The orange line is showing natural gas emissions, and is showing across kind of a, up and down, but a fairly steady kind of emissions level. But then the blue line shows quite dramatic reductions that the county has been able to make in reducing emissions related to electricity generation and use here in Sonoma County. And that shows really it's a 49% decrease. The overall emissions reduction within building energy is a 49% decrease since 1990. And I think what's worth pointing out with this blue line is this shows an 84% reduction specifically in the electrical emissions related to electricity. That is chiefly tied, very closely tied with the formation of Sonoma Clean Power in Sonoma County here in 2012, and the efforts of Sonoma Clean Power and that organization over the intervening years. The other take-home message from this, well, on the positive, the blue line really shows the benefits and positive impacts that Sonoma Clean Power has made. The orange line with the natural gas emissions really shows the the additional work that needs to be done to bring that orange line down, to keep the blue line going down and bring the orange line down. So in-house here within RCPA, RCPA during 2019 really focused on developing and adopting a number of climate emergency resolutions that were adopted by this board and adopted by all of the jurisdictions and the County of Sonoma, the Board of Supervisors. Following those climate emergency resolutions, we began working on a climate mobilization strategy, which was basically looking at our roadmap for how to bring down these emissions in the short term and long term. This mobilization strategy was adopted by the board in March 2021. It lists 13 major strategies that we have been working on here. And really the focus for everything else in this is really talking about strategy number 1, and that is on our all electric buildings campaign. Really first looking at developing how do we get retrofit requirements developed for existing buildings to make those all electric? How do we require that new buildings that are built are constructed as all electric? And then the third is really to integrate equity and social equity concerns, social equity considerations, kind of to embed those really into the work and into any building electrification plans that are developed. So I wanted to focus here first on talking about some of the current efforts that we identified in the climate mobilization strategy and that we're now following through on. And first wanted to talk about efforts around new construction and new homes that are being built. There's been a number of work done, a lot of work done in Sonoma County by a number of jurisdictions to develop all electric building reach codes that then are linked. These are building code amendments that are linked to the 3-year building code cycle and then are needed to be reauthorized every 3 years. So these types of all electric building codes have been adopted recently by the city of Healdsburg, city of Santa Rosa, and the county of Sonoma. There is then another pathway that results in many of the same impacts, many of the same results, but takes a slightly different jurisdictional route, and that is a municipal code amendment that was pioneered by the city of Berkeley and was adopted by the city, used by the city of Petaluma to develop their all-electric code. That specific municipal code amendment is tied up in a recent court challenge and is being heard by the U.S. Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and will be there was just a court finding against the city of Berkeley that is being appealed by the city, but that current case is being watched very closely across the entire state and really across the entire Ninth Circuit. It has direct impacts to the city of Petaluma. It has potential impacts, depending upon what the findings are, to the other cities. And as far as I understand right now, both the city of Cotati and the town of Windsor are in the process of developing and kind of have all electric reach codes they're interested in adopting, but are holding off until things, kind of the landscape is a little bit more clear. So kind of on the all electric reach codes, there's a lot of work that's been done on that. I will circle back to this, but there's a number of resources through the Bay Area Regional Energy Network that are available for that work, and that the kind of the BayREN team and our partners at Climate Action and Resiliency Division have really been doing a lot of the hands-on support with kind of one-on-one with jurisdictions. Also on current efforts, so that was focused really on new construction. Really focused here on the other aspect of it is looking at existing buildings and the steps that are needed to take to upgrade those buildings and change out major appliances. So this is going to be a huge lift for kind of us here at RCPA and for all of the jurisdictions and kind of the entire county. One major kind of first step that's been taken that has some implications is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which covers the bottom 2/3 of the county, has recently established zero nitrogen oxide emissions standards. So that basically, instead of restricting what fuel can come into the building, they're restricting, trying to place limits on what emissions levels can be and pollutant levels can come out of the building, and therefore this results in some of the same impacts of looking at replacing furnaces, natural gas furnaces, and natural gas hot water heaters with heat pump equivalents that would then be zero emissions. Those requirements are going to kick in the next few years, first with the water heater restrictions coming in 2027, and then the furnace restrictions coming in 2029. There is also an implementation working group that is meeting to actually confirm that that is realistically possible before those mandates are actually set in stone. So that is kind of in process, and that we've been watching very closely, and we think will have a huge impact for here within Sonoma County. That doesn't impact new construction. Actually, I believe this actually would also impact new construction. The impact, the key thing here is that this does not mandate that anybody has to proactively replace their equipment, but it does make, as old equipment comes up and needs to be replaced, it will allow us to speed up that process. So the next two slides here, I've actually borrowed from our partners at the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division. This is materials from from their Home Resilience Guide, which was developed and released this past year. And I'm not going to spend too much time walking through this, but I at least wanted to this gives, I think, a very good overview of some of the key leverage points that we were looking to highlight or looking to work with residents, business owners, and local agencies on. It's looking at it's looking at things like the appliances, the insulation, all of the different components of the building and how to work through those kind of a coherent kind of systematic fashion. So with that in mind, with that diagram in mind, I'm not sure how many of these words here you can actually kind of read from the slide, but this shows a little bit of that pathway that building owners, through our work at RCPA, through our partners, that we really kind of try to we'll be walking our kind of people through over the next few years. And it's, it's some common sense things like first is just assessing the energy use in our buildings, visiting the Sonoma Clean Power, the Advanced Energy Center, checking out one of the do-it-yourself toolkits, getting a home energy score, scheduling a better buildings consultation, a number of things that can be done up front. As far as looking at the building envelope and air sealing, there's a number of rebates that are available through the Bay Rent at the regional level, also through the city of Healdsburg for their municipal utility. I want to pause there really quick. A lot of the work that we do and that I'll talk about, I really focused is on Bay Rent at the regional level. We talk a lot about Sonoma Clean Power, and that could provide power to all jurisdiction all throughout the county. I want to highlight the fact that Healdsburg has their own municipal utility, and even though they may not be mentioned as much, they are certainly part of this whole equation with thinking about how we integrate into our marketing, how we integrate their work kind of at the city level in with this larger kind of our larger marketing efforts. So to go back to this really quick, energy, highlighting, upgrading energy efficiency equipment, looking at clean energy options, changing our behavior long-term. These are some of the steps that we kind of want to walk all of us through. And I want to highlight this link here of this home energy digest. This home energy resilience guide is being a great place for both homeowners and business owners, anybody who has kind of a building in mind to use as a reference. So this slide here, I'm not going to go through. I recently compiled and gave a recent presentation at a different time where I go through all of the incentives, rebates, and financing options that are available from all of these different resources, several that I've mentioned here today, a number of other state programs. We are working on some other outreach materials, kind of handouts. There is one handout that we have assembled, which I believe was distributed. And if not, this will be posted online that highlights some of the work around the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, the partnership between RCPA, Bay Ren, the county, and Sonoma Clean Power. There are a number of other highlights, a number of other incentive and rebate programs here. And we will actually be kind of preparing and presenting some of the other materials that really go through much more in a nuts and bolts method of, hey, I need this done, where do I look for money? So then to wrap up, I wanted to talk briefly, my final two slides are talking about kind of where we're going from here in the next steps, specifically within building energy. And so the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, it is authorized by the California Public Utilities Commission, and its funding is comes through the CPUC. The new funding cycle begins next year in 2024 and will run, I believe, for an 8-year budget cycle. And the kind of the some of the highlights of where we hope to use those additional funds is we are going to be able to hire an additional staff member for this for our office here, which will work. That person's time will be split to support the water upgrades SAVE program, and also to improve our coordination and work with the jurisdictions to kind of try to get some of this information more available and more readily available out to your constituents. There's also, using this BayREN funding, there's going to be a development of an electrification assessment checklist to help guide building owners. There'll be additional marketing to multifamily buildings, looking to how to go into a single building that may have dozens, if not hundreds of units, and kind of do all of those at once. Going to continue to working with jurisdictions on the energy reach codes. There will be a new commercial refrigeration replacement program, which is looking at how to basically take the refrigerant that's in refrigeration lines and basically use a safer alternative. Not all the work we do on heat pumps and all of the technology we have across the board is all perfect. So this is a great example of where the technology we have is getting better, and this is a great one that's making it even better. We're going to continue to work, or wanting to work more deeply with the local government partnership, which is funded through PG&E and is housed also at the county's card office. And there's going to be some additional funds to really work on workforce education and training efforts in conjunction with JobLink and with the Workforce Investment Board. So that's really funding at the regional level that's coming down to Sonoma County. And then to wrap up here, specifically, we're going to be looking to develop, in addition to all of this work, develop an existing buildings electrification strategy. There's existing work that's been done by the city of Berkeley, Contra Costa County, San Francisco, and several other jurisdictions that we're looking to kind of leverage and build upon. We'll be working, that will be done very closely in coordination with the BayREN Codes and Standards program. They're conducting a building assessment of every existing building in the 9-county Bay Area as a resource for all of us to use. We also want to develop a better understanding of kind of the state legislative process for policy options, thinking about these issues with the all electric reach codes. And then we also, embedded in all this, is really going to be in elevating social equity considerations and embedding those in to the work that we do, especially with thinking about how to make these programs and these upgrades available to not just those with disposable income, but really to make it possible so that somebody even in our lowest economic classes can really live in sustainable and kind of like really be proud of the buildings that they're living in. So really want to highlight that and integrate that at a deep level into our work. So make this work available kind of across the board to everyone. So with that, thank you. That kind of wraps up my presentation, and I answer any questions.
All right, looking to the board, Director Bagby.
Well, thank you for the presentation and the great overview. I think it kind of reflecting on your last comments, all of the sources of funding really underscore the need for an ombudsman or an assessment followed by, the development of a checklist, followed by, what you qualify for, and then a procedure on directions on how to proceed. I'm after serving on some of these boards, I might be slightly more informed than some. And honestly, when I'm looking at considering how to proceed in my own home, I'm a little flabbergasted on how to proceed. It's like, well, okay, I've gone and learned everything at the Advanced Energy Center that I can, and I'm, looking at the BayREN, and it is a real challenge understanding how to stack some of these benefits. And I think that if you're low income, you're actually eligible for more of the benefits, and it's probably more complex. So how do you think we can best address the issue of helping residents of all income levels navigate this, but then especially if we're integrating equity from the very beginning, how do we achieve that goal?
think there's two aspects, two parts I'd like to hit. One is thinking about materials that I have in mind to create and that I want to work with partners on, is thinking about how do we more of a menu of options. How do we bring all this information into something that's more manageable to understand? And it could be a menu, it could be a checklist, it could be some sort of online form questionnaire. I want to do this, point me in the right direction. So I think some of it is taking our existing information we have and formatting it better and thinking critically through, possibly through kind of personas or use cases. Here's a type of individual in this type of building in this type of in this part of the county. What is their likely pathway? And so maybe we can build some materials around that. The second part I wanted to highlight is the existing work that's being done by Climate Action and Resiliency Division, and that I think could be dramatically expanded in a positive fashion, and that's their Better Buildings consultations they offer. They're normally designed, I think they run for about an hour. They talk about both how to make upgrades, how to pay for those upgrades, how to install solar, a lot of different pieces. And the one limitation that I do believe with that, they're available to meet multiple times, but that is kind of it's a one-time consultation, and then the responsibility comes back to the homeowner, and that's kind of where it lies. But I think that there's a role there for more of that, having somebody who's that helpful friend. Hey, I had another quick question. I wanted to bounce it off of you. And I think there's an incredible role for that of figuring out what's that longer term engagement, not just the 1 hour consultation. So I hope that we can use some of this upcoming Bay Rent funding to kind of expand into that direction. So.
Any other, Director Corsi?
Yeah, I just want to second what Melanie said and what you just said too, BC. I joined the crowd with the trickle, however big it is, recently to mostly electrify my house. Really satisfying work with Sonoma Clean Power and Bay Area. The contractors were good, but I needed a project manager who wasn't.
Yeah.
And having that friend who knows what's going on. But also, I mean, if I didn't have a job where I could, alter my schedule, be there for multiple inspections, multiple walkthroughs, before, after, I still haven't got my final inspection done on the new electrical. I started this in March, and that electrical panel inspection isn't scheduled yet. So, I mean, it's time consuming, it's confusing, it's expensive. So the equity piece of this is really important. And how do we make sure that, half of our population is renters. Their landlords are going to be required to do expensive upgrades on their properties over the next 6 to 10 years. How do we make sure that they're not bearing the burden of that cost to their landlords? Because they're already having hard time as it is. So, the cost isn't the only challenge, but it is a big one. Probably 2 to 3 times what it would cost to just replace with another cheap heater, water heater, air conditioning system. But I believe it's totally worth it. Bay Rent and Snow Clean Power rebates were about 20% of the total cost, which is thank you very much for that. But in the end, I think people need a lot more help than an hour consultation.
And I think that the Better Buildings consultations are incredible for what they are, and it's that long-term engagement. I don't want to sell them short or sell their staff short on that, because they are available and open to any phone call that comes in from any customer at any time to follow up on that conversation. But I think that's figure out how to go deeper, and I'll give some more thought. It's on the home, the kind of the landlord leasing, it's often known as a split incentive. One person has to pay, but the other gets the benefits. And there are ways to work around that, I think. So, yeah.
Director Reynosa?
So, yeah, I just wanted to mention some things that I've run into. One, I volunteer to do free taxes through VITA, United Way. and someone came in with rebates for their solar, I believe. Well, after they did their taxes, they didn't qualify because they didn't owe the government money. It was a rebate to reduce what, so I think understanding how rebates work up front is really important. Cause I could see that person being like, well, you know, why should I do anything else? So rebates, they sound good, but if they're not explained, it could not be something positive. And then when I started looking into this and I started saying, oh, what can I do? And I started hearing that, you know, well, you plan when you're, you know, you plan the life of your refrigerator is so many years. And then you plan, you're going to buy a new one. I'm like, no, I don't plan. I wait till it breaks down. And you know, and a lot of people that I know, it's okay, my washer's not dry, my whatever is not working, it's broken. I need to go get a new one. So it's not something that a lot of people that I know, including myself, it's not something I plan for. So helping people understand those emergency purchases, how do we get there? How do we get to so just stuff to think about when you know, and I'm happy to be part of a group when you talk about equity and reaching out to the Latino community. I know the telenovela thing, I don't think they've done another show recently, but you know, just reaching out, you know, with just little ways of getting started is great. So thank you.
Yeah. Director Farrar Rivas.
So just thinking of a couple of things, which you may have already looked at already, but I found when I was looking at transitioning to a heat pump that the plumbers are kind of the biggest barrier because they constantly try to convince you that the technology is not good enough yet to be doing that. And so, you know, what work is being done there, and then really thinking about who in the long run, what are the businesses that are going to be the beneficiaries of the money that is paid for the products to transition, and how are we working with them to be able to provide more and more services to help people transition. So, because I started thinking of like, well, how did this happen when we electrified all of the houses in the United States? You know, how did that happen? You know, who paid for that? And who really makes the money when those things are going to happen afterwards? Looking at how do you get them to be responsible, seeing that they're going to be making money. How are they actually playing a role in this transition to help support that? So anyway, just a thought.
Vice Chair.
Okay. You know, I just want to follow up on Director Reynosa's comments, and this was something that we really grappled with when we were passing the rule at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, was recognizing that, you know, even though we need to make this transition, even though it's a huge step forward and also will benefit a lot of the communities of color who are so negatively impacted by air pollution in the Metro Bay Area, particularly around the refineries. I mean, this will actually save lives, right? Like this will reduce childhood asthma, and you know, there are a lot of really fantastic public health benefits. And yet, if we do that and then are financially punishing to those folks that we are trying to help their health, we have completely lost, right? We have made no progress whatsoever. And so equity is really a key consideration. And I think that one of the most important things to do is to try to do that proactive outreach so that we let folks know, like, hey, if you do it now, you know, before it breaks, it's basically free, or, you know, like we create sort of incentives that are layered, particularly for low income folks. And so, you know, would really love to follow up with you or sort of hear your thoughts and engage, because the Air District does have this kind of broad Bay Area wide working group talking specifically about how do we address equity. And so it's just such a critical question. I really appreciate you raising those issues.
Any additional comments from the board? Questions? All right, let's go to public comment. Come on up, sir.
Yeah, first off, Chris, I'm doing the same thing with a heat pump, and it is super complicated. I agree with your comments very much. And a bunch of the other things. I think if there's an awful lot, I think, that can be done in this arena with people that are concerned, that don't necessarily take a huge amount of money. It has to do with providing better information, and BC Caps, I think, had an excellent presentation on the value and the difficulty of generating that information. So that's right on, I think. But I'd like to also mention, it's really going to be up to the kids to put the heat on their parents, I think, in this arena. I mean, they're the ones that are going to really be hurting for this. I'm going to get it home free, and a lot of us won't suffer too much. So point is, with the influence in this group, maybe if they're not teaching an adequate amount of climate in school, we ought to pressure them to do it. That ought to be a serious course in school, not to the point of getting them totally discouraged, like I sometimes become, but to get them motivated. So I think that would be really good. And there's some things I think with the building department, maybe in addition, that we haven't quite thought of yet. I mean, just stupid thing, like I think about the roofs, the color of roofs, and everybody seems to be putting in black roofs. Now, is that good for the environment? Does that increase the heat load, or does it make it worse? And I'm not quite sure. Actually, I don't have the data, but one or the other. Either the roof should be reflective, like mine is, cool shingles, or they should be heat absorbing. Need to work the math to find out. But if we had an answer to that, maybe that could be part of the building code, or at least a suggestion to people. So I think there's information that could be put out there, influence that could be put out there, and we don't want to give up on this thing. So I guess that's my point. I guess the last thing would be, I think it'd be really neat, somebody had already suggested it, to have some brainstorming sessions to figure out what some of these other avenues are that are aside from, tax, other ways to get things to happen, influence, education, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew, do we have any hands on Zoom?
I do not see any members of the public who should speak for this item.
All right, sounds great. I'll bring it back to the board then. And yeah, I agree that our youth continuing to push is definitely a component of it. But I'll tell you, I remember 15 years ago arguing with my grandpa who lives in Virginia. And he told me, he said, yeah, climate change is real, but you're going to ruin the economy trying to solve it. And at least I'll be dead before we see the impacts of it. And he had to tell me a couple of weeks ago, whoops. So it is the youth that are leading, but we're all certainly feeling the impact, particularly as Director Farrar Rivas mentioned, with the highest global average temperatures on record 5 days in a row. So any additional comments from the board? Director Bagby?
I just want to inject a little bit of a good note into this conversation, and that is that just to remind everyone that the Sonoma Water actually has a youth program that goes into the grade schools. It started out as their water education program, but with funds actually supplied from Sonoma Clean Power, they also have an energy component, and they do outreach to several, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but several elementary schools. And so kids in Sonoma County schools are getting education about where their water comes from and the importance of energy. And hopefully, just like my generation got our parents to start recycling, hopefully these kids are telling their parents, mom, dad, when the water heater kicks off, we need to go to Sonoma Clean Power Advanced Energy Center and look at those products first. So that is the hopeful note I hope we can close this conversation on.
Yeah. I think we need to reframe that the climate change isn't something that's going to happen. It's something that's happening, that's happened. With that, thank you, BC.
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
So we did for our climate, well, we did this for all of our commissions in Sonoma, added a youth seat. And so we have a climate action commission. We have a young woman on that seat who did, like, I think after the first commission meeting she was on, she did 5 presentations in the high school. And so they're very motivated. So, I mean, it's how we employ them and get them as part of our discussions, I think, and get them in front of the city councils as well, too, as much as you can.
Very good suggestion. Thanks.
All right, thanks. We'll go on to item 5.3. That's our 2024 State Highway Operations and Protections Program proposed projects. Howdy, James.
All right, good afternoon. So we're here to talk about the SHOPP, the State Highway Operations Protection Program, specifically the 2024 SHOPP cycle. The SHOPP is Caltrans' most robust. The SHOPS is Caltrans' most robust program, focuses on safety, 4 core assets. The 4 core assets are roads, bridges, culverts, and ITS. ITS is intelligent transportation systems. It includes everything from changeable message signs to ramp metering to camera and video detections on the state highway system. There are over 30 eligible assets within the SHOPP that they fund, but safety is the #1 priority. Safety projects are continuously programmed throughout the year. Aside from safety projects, programming for the SHOPP happens on a 2-year cycle in an even year. That's why we're looking at the 2024 SHOPP. The action today serves 2 purposes. First, to ensure that eligible Sonoma County priorities are represented in the SHOPP, and to continue the strong partnership that SCTA has with Caltrans regarding the SHOPP to benefit all modes of travel in Sonoma County. The SHOPP continues to be underfunded and oversubscribed. Therefore, operational improvements are rare, and the focus is on safety and maintenance. The 2024 SHOPP programming is primarily for 2028 construction. This is to allow for the development of projects through environmental review, design, and right-of-way acquisition prior to advancing to construction. Inclusion, or a couple requirements to be included in the 2024 SHOPP is you do have to be included in the 10-year SHOPP plan, as well as have a project initiation document or PID as part of the development process prior to programming. Transportation funding can be complex and restrictive. The SHOPP is no exception here. The partnering that we've done with Caltrans on the SHOPP, though, has led to less public inconvenience and delivered construction projects with multiple benefits. The SHOPP successes in the past that I'd like to share with you have been projects like the Highway 101 between Windsor and Santa Rosa, where essentially Caltrans was going to do pavement rehab. SCTA was advancing a carpool lane. We were able to combine fund sources, do pavement rehab and a carpool lane project in one. Another one is the State Route 116-121 roundabout that's out to bid right now. That project is one in which SCTA used Measure M dollars to advance the project. As it advanced it, we did not have construction funding adequate within the measure. Caltrans came to the table with $19 million to complete the funding plan for that project. Another very recent example is in Guerneville, where Caltrans is mandated to do ADA requirements. And under that mandate, they collaborated with Sonoma County Public Infrastructure and was able to add other components to that scope of work, which Sonoma County Public Infrastructure did have to pay for, but it makes it so that you're doing one project, the right project, address all the issues within a project area in partnership with Caltrans. So while staff does engage year-round with Caltrans on the SHOPP and their priorities, and also reports to the board monthly within our projects and program activities report, you'll see a robust SHOPP list. The projects that you see within that list are going year-round. But what we have is that in the even years, this is our opportunity to give our input, give our feedback, so that when these programming actions happen early next year at the CTC, Sonoma County voice will be heard. So the last letter that we sent is in July 2021. This is that 2-year cycle that I've been referring to. We did meet with Caltrans staff on June 19th, just last month. They provided a map to us. Ross, if you could throw that map up, I'd like to speak to it just briefly. What we're included in your packet is a draft letter that essentially points out to Caltrans, what our SHOPP priorities are. The letter starts out with the SHOPP priorities that were approved by the board in 2022. So we're not letting go of those projects. The project list does become long, but they're still a priority to this county and I believe to this board, as illustrated in that letter 2 years ago. Additionally, on this map, the new letter points out new requests. New requests are ID1. ID1 is a pavement project on State Route 116 that goes from Monte Rio all the way to just west of Sebastopol. There's opportunities for collaboration on existing projects through Forestville that Measure M has funded, as well as opportunities to work with Caltrans on complete street elements as part of that paving project. ID number 2 on the map in front of you is ADA mandates on State Route 12 within Sebastopol. Once again, an opportunity for Caltrans to work directly with City of Sebastopol staff to make sure that that project is holistic as possible, not just addressing the mandates, but addressing other needs within that area. And then the other one that comes out on that map is ID number 5. ID number 5 is some safety improvements on State Route 121. State Route 121 project goes through the intersection of State Route 121 8th Street East, where we are advancing a project initiation document at SCTA in collaboration with Sonoma County Public Infrastructure. There's an opportunity to combine projects and batch them together, economy of scale, delivering that one project with the least impact to the traveling public. Project number 4 on the map is already part of those 2022 requests that we made. And there's 2 other projects mentioned in the letter that are not on the map. The one project is State Route 116 Lakeville Highway within the city limits. That's a project that the city of Petaluma is advancing. They're advancing it with a corridor study, looking to address the collisions along that corridor. And it's going to be a good opportunity for future funding cycles. They have applied as part of the grant application that was submitted by SCTA last month for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And then lastly, not on the map, but in the letter is the State Route 12 Verano safety improvements. That is a project that SCTA, Sonoma County Public Infrastructure, City of Sonoma, and Caltrans have been working together. Caltrans has presented at the Springs Municipal Advisory Committee a couple times, and it's to show the board's commitment to address those safety concerns there. With that, staff recommendation is to send the attached letter with any board requested edits that would be made to it. Continue to report out monthly in our projects and programming activities report with regard to the status of the SHOPP. And lastly, return to you on that 2-year cycle in 2025 to continue to influence the SHOPP and partner with Caltrans on the next cycle in 2026. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, James. Any questions? Let's go to public comment.
Currently not seeing any members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
All right, I'll bring it back and I will look for a motion.
Actually-
Oh, but before we go there, Vice Chair.
Well, I can second that motion and then I just have some comments about a related topic, if that's okay. Does
Sounds
that
great.
work? All right. You know, I appreciate that what we're talking about right now is, you know, kind of limited to the highways. But in related news, I just wanted to provide my board with an update and sort of ask for support in trying to not seek new funding, but pull back funding that was previously promised that has been actually revoked by Caltrans for a critical project in West County. We have been working, actually, it was, I think, a few months after I took office, and I believe that Director Smith was there with me when the CTC came up to Monterey and yelled at us for not delivering a bridge project that had been apparently funded like 20 years previously. And I was like, well, the first 20 years weren't my fault, but now that I've been in the job for a few months, we'll work really hard on it. And the Board of Supervisors actually recently approved, you know, the final EIR for this new bridge design. We spent years working with the community. We had endless town hall meetings. We argued over the design of streetlights and where the thing would go and et cetera, et cetera. Finally got to a solution. And at literally the last minute, Caltrans is now saying, actually, we can't fund your bridge. We're just going to do some sort of seismic retrofits of this, I think, 92-year-old bridge that has no sort of meaningful bike or pedestrian, you know, lanes and doesn't meet code. And so, you know, this hasn't really been a public conversation, but I think it's really important for this board to know. And I would just sort of ask that, you know, this is obviously, you know, focused on the SHOPP program, but in kind of future conversations with Caltrans, that we really work with our state legislators to try to actually get that funding that was promised. And so it's kind of a crazy story. And it was, as I shared earlier with the chair, the most Caltrans-y thing that Caltrans has ever done to me. So it's kind of inexplicable and it's very frustrating. And so we just kind of ask for this board's support and for staff's continued work to find creative funding solutions for this.
This might be that
Thank you.
And I don't want to spill.
The Vice Chair is happy to lend you her microphone.
I bet. Does this happen to be on a state route or a highway?
Where is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Monterey's main
Okay,
bridge.
the main-
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Okay.
that is the bridge and it was on a list for state funding for replacement. And now they're basically saying it's too old and crummy and not up to standard for us to replace it. So we're just going to seismically retrofit
That
it
makes sense.
and hope that it survives the next several floods, essentially. But you probably have more engineering specific terms, but that's my summary.
But is it on a state route or is it's not? It's not, it's on a county road. Okay, so that was my question. To see if it would be eligible to add to the letter, but.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
But-
sorry, Linda.
So we can definitely come back to that also later. But for now, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any additional discussion on sending the letter? Seeing none.
I just have a comment on the letter.
Go for it.
I'm just very happy to see that so many of our projects are about connecting our communities and widening the providing shoulders and providing bike lanes, while we don't have dedicated bike lanes on a lot of these areas, it's important for us to move toward that. But in the meantime, it's just important to remember that so many of those routes are essential for cyclists and of course our buses and for, folks who are commuting. So I think it's a really great list. I'm a little disappointed that sea level rise and Highway 37 was number 9, but I realized that they are not in the order of importance on that previous letter. So, but I think it's in this letter and our priorities are really indicative of us trying to make the transition to connect our communities, not just by car, but by bicycle and other means as well. So I wholly support the letter. I'm looking forward to voting. If I shut up, I'll go ahead and vote.
Go ahead, Director Ford.
Just, you probably already caught it, but in the second complete paragraph, there's an or that should be our.
Thank you.
All right, with that, all in favor? Any opposed? Perfect. You've got board approval. Thank you, James, with that correction, obviously.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our advisory committee agendas. Those are attached in the document. We'll go to our executive committee report and I'll just do a quick report out. We are in the process of recruiting for our next executive director, number 2 in the line of succession, after Suzanne. If you have not had an opportunity yet to talk with a recruiter about what you are looking for in an executive director, please give them a call this week or schedule an appointment. I think that they've spoken to a little over half the board at this point, and we are aiming to get the recruitment out early next week. The executive board met and started to discuss what community panel members might be valuable to have the input from. This will bring that fully back to the board for discussion along with the applicants. The aim is to have the recruitment out for a month for people to be able to respond. Again, trying to get that recruitment out the door early next week. So if you could complete those interviews, that would be great. We also discussed the polling that we discussed earlier. No additional information in the executive board from what we discussed. Move on to item 6.3, regional agency reports. Are there any reports that folks would like to make?
Sure. I'll report on GGB. My colleague's not here. We ratified an emergency action to effect repairs to our gasoline storage tanks at the Larkspur Landing. We approved and awarded preliminary design contract for our new San Rafael Transportation Center. We approved the 2023-2024 budget. Update on the suicide deterrent net as it's nearly completed. Just around the towers is left to go. Traffic remains depressed along the 101 corridor. Losses of week June 5th through 10th are at 920,000. Quick crayon here says week of the 18th at 760,000. And we had a nice little holiday surge there, but last week 550,000. So the struggle is real with the Golden Gate Bridge, but that's my report.
Okay. And I'll just say from the SMART perspective, yes, fewer people on 101, but more people on SMART.
Yep.
SMART actually hit its highest ridership ever, not just post-pandemic, but ever last week with some of the trains that were coordinated with events going on down in Petaluma and elsewhere. Director Bagby?
Yep, I'll just add to, I think it's been pretty well documented in the news. Not only has SMART, I feel really bad saying this, Gerard, I'm sorry. After your report, not only have we exceeded the ridership goals and the previous ridership at pre-pandemic, but I think it's pretty well documented that the funding will be proceeding to Windsor, and we have about half of the funding that we need to go to Healdsburg. So things are, and six months ago, there was zero funding to go to Healdsburg. So yeah, things are looking really good. So we're pretty happy over at SMART right now.
Can I ask a quick question about that? And if I understand right, the multi-use trail will be constructed at the same time as the rails to Windsor?
Oh, that's a
Do we
great
know?
question. I wish I had my
So
engineer here.
the answer is yes.
I think the answer, I think the answer is yes, but I would be happy to get you some more information on that as well.
Yeah, the answer is yes, and also, while it's always complicated for us to talk about the multi-use path along with the train, is some of it does fall into city jurisdictions. So there is segments that need to be built that SMART is taking the lead on, and then there's places where it becomes more compatible for the town of Windsor to jump in and take over.
Which Windsor approved a budget to
Yeah.
include some money. To help with that.
What I am pretty sure about is that the last round of funding in partnership with our local partners, including the segment in Pengrove, we are funded for the multi-use trail from Windsor to Petaluma. So I can't give you any dates, but we have the funding lined up for Windsor to Petaluma.
We'll go on to our activities reports. We'll start with the marketing and communications report and bring up Ross.
All right, good afternoon, directors. Going to report out on marketing and communications activities over the past month. The first is our activities related to the Climate Protection Initiative. We did some direct outreach and listening sessions, and just to jump in related to what was discussed earlier, I do think that all of this will be applicable to future climate work, even aside from the initiative. But RCPA staff conducted 2 listening sessions in June in partnership with the NAACP Sonoma County chapter. The first was held in person and the second was virtual. After a brief presentation on RCPA and the Climate Protection Initiative, attendees were asked about climate-related concerns and their priorities in communities, what they thought of the proposed solutions. The feedback received was valuable and will definitely help the effort moving forward. Future listening sessions are scheduled to be organized by the Asian American Pacific Islander Coalition, as well as Latino service providers. And that's planned for July and August. RCPA's goal is to directly engage underrepresented communities and gather input for the CPI, but also other Sonoma climate mobilization projects in the future to ensure they're equitable and representative of local priorities. RCPA staff also conducted some direct engagement with community-based organizations in June, meeting with the Community Action Partnership to discuss climate adaptation and resilience work, as well as getting feedback on the measure. Smart Connect ribbon cutting, staff attended that, and I know some of you did as well, on June 16th to recognize and celebrate a key connection that allows transit riders to easily access the Sonoma County Airport and surrounding businesses. And lastly, the Sonoma Clean Power Lead Locally collaboration. Continuing this program, staff assembled a series of blog posts, newsletter articles to post on RCPA channels. Content promoted electrification and energy efficiency upgrade programs that are currently offered by Sonoma Clean Power. This promotion continued through June, but we'll have some blog posts up that kind of put all the information together nicely. And that is my report. Please let me know if you have any questions about marketing and communications activities.
Thank you so much, Ross. Any questions from the board? All right, seeing none, we'll go on to climate. Bring up Tanya.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. So you've already heard quite a bit about what RCPA has been working on over the last month in the previous board items, so I'm not going to go into those in any detail, but did want to mention a couple other areas that we're working on. One is in the area of climate policy tracking. So in the activities report, we mentioned SB 511, which is the greenhouse gas emissions inventories, which would require CARB to prepare periodic inventories for all jurisdictions in California. So we are still tracking that one. It's in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. And then there's two climate bond bills that are making their way through the legislature that I wanted to mention. One is AB 1567, the Safe Drinking Water, Wildfire Prevention, Drought Preparation, Flood Protection, Extreme Heat Mitigation, Clean Energy and Workforce Development Bond Act of 2024, quite a mouthful. And both of these bonds are $15 billion roughly. And the status of that one is it's in the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee. And then there's the companion bill in the Senate, SB 867, which has, I think, pretty much the same name as the other one, but it does include climate smart ag, park creation and outdoor access, also clean energy. And that one is in the Assembly Natural Resources Committee. There was a hearing scheduled for today, which I understand has been postponed. So that's the update I have there. But we understand that the governor is very interested in placing a climate bond on the ballot. So we'll continue to track those bills. And then on the GHG inventory side and climate data, BC is continuing to work with Adam and the planning team to look at potential software solutions that would allow us to provide more climate data online for jurisdictions in the community at large, and also looking at launching our next greenhouse gas inventory. And we'll be bringing an update on that to you at a future board meeting. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight in the activities report, we include a list of the upcoming Climate Action Resiliency Division workshops. Those are excellent sources of information for your constituents to learn more about a variety of aspects related to electrification, efficiency, et cetera. Those workshops are recorded and posted on CARD's website for folks who can't attend them live, but highly recommend that you check those out. And that is my update for today. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Tanya? Okay, we'll move on to our planning report. Bring up Chris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Directors. So I'll be hitting on a few of the high points from the planning activities report from this month. So as James mentioned, we were able to get our safe streets and roads for all applications submitted. So that was a great team effort with staff from SCTA, including David, Adam, Shauna, and Ross, and partners from Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Windsor, Smart, Santa Rosa, and Petaluma. So a lot of staff working together to put together a grant application that we feel good about. So at this point, application's in, and we expect awards to be announced in December of this year. So fingers crossed that we'll be successful there. Looking at data management and forecasting, Adam has been able to support Healdsburg as they are considering submitting an application to create a new PDA in Healdsburg. So providing some data support there, looking at potential boundaries and smart station locations in Healdsburg and looking at demographics and land use around those areas. So moving on to the countywide active transportation plan. So over the last month, there was a project kickoff with consultants and participating jurisdictions to review the project scope of work, schedule, roles and responsibilities, and really iron out some of the communication protocols associated with that planning effort. Staff from Cotati and SCTA staff were able to also present to the Cotati Planning Commission on the project. So they're leading the charge. They really want to wrap theirs up early and have contributed to help make that happen. So that has kicked off. And then staff is also continuing to work on developing an existing conditions report and gather data for that planning effort. So that's moving forward right now. Looking at the region, MTC and ABAG are officially kicking off Plan Bay Area 2050 update this month in July. So there's been a lot of activity associated with that. We've been working with MTC and ABAG staff to update planning assumptions and funding assumptions for Sonoma County. And MTC has indicated that they'll be kicking off a new website for the plan update over the next couple of weeks. So we'll include a link to that in our next planning activities report, so you have easy access to that. Looking at safe routes to school, the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition has held learn to ride sessions and bike rodeos in Santa Rosa, Windsor, Petaluma, Sonoma, Sebastopol, and Rohnert Park. And they've completed their priority enrollment into the Safe Routes to School program for the 23-24 school year. section. So a lot of activity there. And then on bike share, there's actually an RFP that you reviewed the draft for last month. That's actually open right now, and we're expecting proposals by August for that project. So good to see that out there, and hoping we get some good proposals on that. So that's it. So the planning team's here to answer any questions, or I'll make an attempt if there are any. So appreciate it.
Great work. Any questions from the board? Director Bagby?
Thanks, great presentation. On page 126, under that regional planning and funding opportunities, if I can, read the governmentese that's in here. I know that Cloverdale actually, I'm surprised Healdsburg doesn't have a PDA. Cloverdale's had PDA for several years. It's the Downtown Smart Transit PDA. So could you kind of explain how that might feed into the priority sites pilot?
Yeah, having a PDA specifically.
Is
So
it already helpful?
The intent there is to, provide some seed funding to do some planning and also development of affordable housing. So MDC's offered consultations with the different jurisdictions to kind of talk about that program a little bit more, but I'd be happy to get all that information packaged up and send it over to you.
That would be great. And actually, I think that, our Public Works Director at the next TAC will probably be asking for support on seeking that. And then and just kind of seeing how those pieces fund together, and it actually feeds into the oh gosh, what's the name of the legislation that's related to the VMT? Because we actually need some, we're hoping to get some planning dollars to update our trench. Okay, we're on the same page, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, there is technical assistance funding associated with SB 743 implementation. So yeah, have your staff please reach out to me and MTC and ABAG, and we can make sure the connections are made there.
Okay, yeah, I think Derek will be reaching out because we're definitely interested in that. And then just kind of going down to Plan Bay Area 2050. First of all, I was wondering if it's not part of Plan Bay Area, it's in one of the other paragraphs. Is the Smart Connect going to be part of the Sonoma County Frequency Boost project? Will that be?
It's not currently in there, but there'll be an opportunity to add new things going forward. So.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would reach out to Smart staff and work with them on that. And then also I noticed that the Smart to Healdsburg and Cloverdale is not included in that planned Bay Area 2050. I thought that this board had given clear direction that we wanted to move in that direction. And I think it's more important given the more recent funding that's been allocated to Smart, since we have that, we're halfway to Healdsburg after we're already funded to Windsor. So I just wanted to, make sure that that is still a priority that SCTA is pushing for, making sure that at the very least Healdsburg is in the next version of Plan B area, but that they know that we're still going to push for getting Cloverdale in the next version at the very least.
Yeah, we're actually meeting with Smart staff tomorrow to strategize on how to move forward.
Okay,
with that.
great.
So definitely on our radar.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, let's go to our projects and programming report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, directors. The activities report is in your packet, but I would like to offer you a couple of highlights. The first being the Highway 116-121 project, as James mentioned, is out to bid, and the bidders requested some additional time. So there was an extension, plus there was an addendum released by Caltrans. So the new bid opening date is tomorrow, July 11th. Late last month, on the Hearn Avenue Interchange project, the CTC voted to allocate local partnership program funding from both the competitive program and the formulaic program. So that project is fully funded, and Caltrans will be advertising that project for bids in September, and construction is anticipated to begin in early 2024. And then finally, there were a couple of federal notices of funding opportunities that were released. One was one is called the Multimodal Project Discretionary Grant Opportunity, and the other is Connecting Communities and Neighborhoods. And staff reviewed those programs and notices and did not find anything that we think is currently eligible on the project lists that we have, but we are coordinating with the TAC to see if there's anything that we're unaware of. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to announcements from board members. I'll start, see if our executive director has any other surprise announcements that you want to make.
Wow.
I'm good.
Really?
You're good. All right, I'll go around the table and see if we've got any from board members. Director Hinton.
Oh, there it is. I just wanted to apologize for being late to the meeting today. I did have an emergency at work, which I let the chair know. And then I was able to listen to the meeting on my commute in here. So
There you go.
thank you. And again, apologize to the board.
Any other announcements?
Are you going to report on SCCA?
Go for it.
No, you go ahead.
No, go for it.
We had a lovely gala for Sonoma County Conservation Action and honored some wonderful individuals leading the way in conservation and upstream, and just all different categories. It was a great evening, had a beautiful host, and I think a good time was had by all.
All right, well, thank you. My one announcement is just a huge thank you to SCTA staff, as well as the partnership with our own staff. Thanks to intense lobbying efforts and putting together an application. Santa Rosa was one of the few jurisdictions actually that received funding from the no and low bus emission program. So we received almost $10 million for our efforts. That puts us, I believe, now at the funding for the buses and the charging infrastructure for, I think, 20 out of our 30 buses in our entire fleet. And so we've got our first ones that have rolled off the lot and are in circulation. You'll see them. You won't hear them quite like you normally do, which is great. And it's better for the employees as well in a number of ways, not the least of which is cleaner air around them. But we have Proterra buses that have been where we've been using them. We're seeing how they do before we make our next purchase. But really just a huge thank you to the staff and the team for pushing that forward. And thank you to the Department of Transportation. I told Charles, I said, I'm going to keep meeting with you till you give us funding. And he finally did. So I guess he's tired of me. So thank you, everybody. Drew, let's go to public comment for the announcements and our reports.
I'm currently not seeing any members of the public who wish to speak on either the reports or on the announcements.
Okay, anybody else in person? Great, I'll bring it back and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.